Okay, so here we go. Part 3 of why do I really need to enroll and vote? Frontline Perspective. So I want to take you back to something I read in Part 2, actually in Part 1, and I brought out the numbers that appear on the screen there in front of you. There. But there's something else in there that I want to highlight and expand upon. It's just give definition to, right? Basically, I just want to give definition to it. It says there, a strong democracy requires all citizens to be able to participate equally. Sorry, I'm picking my nose again, not making hand signs. As Australia has a system of compulsory voting. Compulsory voting, right? Well, I've just read through the Constitution. 1900, the Australian Constitution Act, but it's actually printed with the amendments in it as well that have been passed by referendum of the people. Right, so this one here, I've just read through that. I'd like to give a report on what I found in there too, because there are things in our favour and there are things in here that are not in our favour either. Right, looking at it from the perspective of the people and the amount of government control. But there are definitely things in here that speak very strongly in our favour too. The preamble, right? The sections of the preamble, the beginning and the sections of the preamble, right, which are removed from the corporate constitution. If you go to the Parliament House website, Australian Parliament House website, and look up Constitution of Australia, you'll be able to download a PDF or a copy of the corporate version, which removes the preamble, which is, as I said before, actually removes direct reference to the nature of the covenant under God Almighty that this document actually codifies, right, and preserves on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. Right, it's a covenant. So it's actually a spiritual contract made between the people and the government in the sight of God Almighty. Right, it's right there in the first lines of the preamble, man. Right, the statement of the purpose of the Act of the Commonwealth of Australia Act, the Federation of the States, into one indissoluble Commonwealth. That's another reason they got rid of the preamble, because it's indissoluble, man. If you fuck with this the way that they have, you've actually dissolved the Commonwealth without a referendum and without even informing the people of Australia publicly of what you've done. That is treason. That's high crime. That's treason. Right, it's an indissoluble Commonwealth. So the event that the guy who Brian Shaw pointed me to, right? The event that one of the most recent events that actually dissolved the Commonwealth, Brian Shaw pointed me to as an event that took place as a result of Western Australian legislation in 2004. You'll find that in documentation that Corey has, that he handed me, the details of that, or you can go and look it up. But Corey definitely has that documentation, right? So they're actually breaking a spiritual covenant, a spiritual contract between God, between the people and the government in the sight of God Almighty. That's what it states in the preamble, right? So all of that is removed from the corporate version of the Constitution. And is there any wonder why? So that needs to be stated in court too, the nature of this covenant, which is the Commonwealth Constitution of Australia. Right, so I read through there, and there's no direct reference to compulsory voting that I could see. I think the government, the Parliament has provision to make laws, etc., for the number of people that can vote, or there are distinctions between people that can and can't vote, Definitely in the Constitution there are distinctions between people who can and can't vote. There's even a distinction in subjects. A subject of the Crown is a distinction that's found in the Commonwealth Constitution of Australia. But I couldn't find anything directly on compulsory voting. So I had a look at I went to look up the definition of compulsory in this dictionary. Phil loaned me this. This is a very good dictionary to look at if you want to understand how the current legal system fucking defines things, man. Like I've been doing a lot of research in Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition, and that is actually very, very useful to get a proper understanding of the true nature of the legal system in terms of its definition, and it deals a lot with common law. These guys are very biased in the information they give you, man. There's fucking words that they leave out of here that should be included in a legal dictionary, even a concise one, right, etc. One of the words that they leave out is actually compulsory. They don't have compulsory as a legal definition, but they do have compulsory acts, right, such as compulsory acquisition of land, compulsory acquisition of securities, compulsory arbitration, compulsory conference, compulsory jurisdiction. That's quite interesting to look at. Compulsory professional indemnity insurance. That would be interesting to look at too. This is quite useful because it gives references to case law and also to the acts with section numbers that they refer to as their authorities. So you can go and chase the legislation, man, and see the bullshit that they've been going on with. But you have this as well, compulsory voting, right? So that's a direct definition here out of this book about this subject here, compulsory voting in Australia, and this gives definition for law in Australia, man. Whereas Black's Law Dictionary is more geared toward an international or the legal or the American legal system, American and English legal system rather than specifically Australian. So this is interesting because it gives an up-to-date perspective on how the Australian legal system sees their own bullshit. All right, so I'll read it for you. Compulsory voting, the requirement that all persons enrolled to vote must vote in an election. Compulsory voting was included in the Commonwealth elections in 1924, so well after the establishment of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. State and territory elections. In Australia, voting is compulsory for all Commonwealth, state and territory elections. For example, Commonwealth Electoral Act, 2009 Commonwealth, Section 245, subsection 1, Electoral Act, 1992 Queensland, Section 164, as well as some local government elections. For example, City of Sydney Act, 1988, New South Wales, Section 22, subsection 1, Local Government Act 1993, Queensland, section 282. Right. So most of these are coming out of fucking questionable legislation, especially the local government acts, as local government has no fucking constitutional head of power or reference at all. Something that's simply been created by the Parliament in obvious denial of the intention of the Constitution of Australia at the very least. Right, in not including local government, there's the ability for state government, but the reason they want to break it down into local government and local councils so that you can be ruled as part of a nation state by your local councillor, the way they used to do under City of London, aldermen, etc. Right, which is what the Mason's livery is all about and directly connected to. They trace their lineage back even further than the Freemasons, right? Mason's livery members. Freemasons will trace their lineage back. If they really know their history, they can go back as far as the mid 1600s to Francis Bacon and John Dee, right? But they were formalised in 1717. Wonder why fucking Trump's favourite number was 17. There's another reason for that too, which I can elaborate on and even show you proof of it out of the Freemasons' own material. In fact, I think I may have even done a report on that at one stage and put it on Telegram. Now it's years ago. It's fucking years ago, man, that I put that information up. So, Mason's livery people who want to get you back under what I'm talking about, what this is actually trying to show you, why they're trying to include local government and local council as legitimate government, or what they have actually have information that I found that calls it the third arm of government. There's a push within the government, within the parliament itself, to establish the local council as the third arm of government with no constitutional basis whatsoever. Hence the problem for local councils and local government to actually access Commonwealth funding, because it's not provided for them within the Constitution. It's provided for the states, but not for local councils. So they access funding from the states, I guess, which then in turn tries to find a way of reimbursing itself from the Commonwealth for what it's had to fund the councils with. And they'd have some sort of shifty system by which they do that. I will guarantee you some sort of corporate-based system, not constitutional-based system. Because if you read through the Constitution, it's quite clear how funds and debts are to be transferred back and forth between the federal government and the states, but not local government, man. So Mason's livery can trace their lineage and their heritage back to 1515, where they were actually constituted by the aldermen of the City of London. We know that that's part of the original power triangle that emerged before the turn of this century, but has definitely dominated the last 100 years, and well and truly into this century, though that power structure has become a lot more elaborate at this point too. It's got a lot more points to it. But yes, we know that City of London is one of the elitists, corporate main power players, power brokers, globalist, Freemasonic Illuminati power brokers, and international banker fucking power brokers. Yeah. So the Mason's livery comes straight from, and it boasts itself of working co-jointly with the City of London over the course of their relationship. So that's like, 1,500 years. So what have we got now? Fuck, man, that's 520 odd years. Almost 520 years. So they want to return to that council-ruled nation-state ruled by broken into local districts ruled by the councils, and the aldermans of the councils, or the chief councillor, head councillor, mayor of the fucking council, under a globalist neo-feudalistic system that is subservient to the United Nations, who break you up into the nation states and try to make you compliant with international law. Everyone complies with international law instead of the law of the land. In this case, the Constitution calls it the law of the Commonwealth. So they want to remove that completely. and hence they are pushing the local council agenda. But you see, compulsory voting doesn't come straight out of the Constitution. It comes out of, even in some cases, very questionable fucking legislative acts of Parliament, right? And most of them are quite modern acts of Parliament too. The most current ones that they give, right, which are all corporatised. So then it also says to see compulsory enrolment. So you go over and read compulsory enrolment. The requirement that all persons who have attained the age of 18 and who are Australian citizens enrol to vote. Commonwealth Electoral Act 1918, Commonwealth Section 93. So 1918, they made it compulsory for us to vote. Really. What else does it say here under compulsory voting? Oh, yes, the stick that they hold over you. Failure to vote without a valid and sufficient reason is an offence. Valid and sufficient, well, who determines that? I guess they do. Although at this point, to me, peaceful non-compliance, non-consent, direct non-contract and non-consent with the corporate system, or conscientious objection seems like the best course to take as far as re-engaging with the Australian electoral system. Fuck, man. Failure to vote without a valid and sufficient reason is an offence, but it's not breaking the law, right? It's not breaking the law. It's not a crime. For example, and it gives you their justification for saying that. Commonwealth Electoral Act 1918, Commonwealth Section 245, Parliamentary Elections and Elections Act 1912, New South Wales, Sections 120C, 120F. Right, so they're going to make it compulsory to vote. And they're going to hold a stick over you that if you don't have a sufficient and valid reason, it's an offence. Well, let's have a look. I couldn't find the definition of compulsory because I believe that things that are compulsory come under the same things that are come under the same classification of law as things that are regulated, as things that are mandated, as things that are directed, as things that are policy, right? All of which they call soft law or grey letter law, because none of it really has any substantiation in legislation. And legislation itself is subservient to both common law and constitutional law in the hierarchical system, in the law's hierarchical system of precedence or authority. Go and look that up. You can find that clearly stated in Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition under the entry common law. And you'll see just what the hierarchy of authority is there. Right, so legislation, just to say it's legislated doesn't mean that it's law, right, or that it's lawful under the greater authority of common law and constitutional law. According to Black's Law Dictionary definition, man, I'm not making this shit up. Go and read it for yourselves. So, if they're going to, so you can't find compulsory because I believe it's of the same nature as a mandate or a regulation. So they don't include the definition for compulsory in this dictionary, but they do actually include the definition for compulsion. So all of these things that follow that are compulsory, that it defines as compulsory acts. All of these things are acts of compulsion, right? They are acts of compulsion. If someone makes something compulsory for you, it's an act of compulsion. They are compelling you to do it, right? So what is compulsion? What's their legal definition of compulsion? Compulsion, coercion, extortion, exaction or use of force, right? Hence the threat, hence the stick they hold over you. If you don't do this, you're committing an offence, right? But they're trying to coerce you into complying with something using extortion, exaction, or use of force. Second definition, action forcing a person to agree to something, right? So it's a use of force, compulsion. So anything you make compulsory is an act of coercion, extortion, an action of forcing a person to agree to something, right? So they're making it compulsory for you to enroll, and they're making it compulsory for you to vote, right? So they're actually forcing you to agree to something that you may not want to agree to. And they're coercing you and extorting you, right? Compulsion in contract law includes every species of duress. Oh, right, it's a form of duress. Fuck, look up the doctrine of duress, right? If you want a legal way out of this, because it's a contract law, man. If they're operating as a corporation, then they're trying to contract you in through coercion, under compulsion, right? Through coercion and force under compulsion, which is actually, it says here, in contract law includes every species of duress, actual or threatened, right? So they don't even have to do it. They just have to threaten it. And I just read the threat out for you, right? In psychiatry, receptive and seemingly purposeful behaviour that is performed according to certain rules or in stereotyped fashion. See duress, unjust enrichment. I wonder if that's what their motive for enrolment is, unjust enrichment. But it certainly comes under, as a contractual matter, it comes under the doctrine of duress. Fuck. I should read duress for you, and then I'll sign off. And this will be the third one. The third part, I'll have to get to the rest of it in the fourth part. I didn't mean to spend this long on this, but this is interesting. There's some other things I have to look up: due process of law, C, administration of justice, and due process rights. I'll just make a note of that quickly. Due administration of justice. Okay, so you want duress. Duress, conduct by which one person applies pressure or undue persuasion on another to induce that other to do something or refrain from doing something. Duress may take the form of constraint by injury, confinement, or threats. Contract, illegitimate pressure applied to obtain a consensual promise. Exactly the problem with the COVID mandates, right? Exactly the problem with those. Duress, man. And they're doing the same thing here by compelling you to vote. Compulsion. And that's the contract definition. Illegitimate pressure applied to obtain a contractual promise, payment, service, or other benefit. For example, Smith and William Charlick Limited, 1924, 34 CLR 38, 1924 HCA 13. The elements of common law duress, which we have access to because we operate under the common law system, that is enshrined in our Constitution. I'll show you where. Section 80. Read it closely and you'll see the fact that it's even there shows that the Constitution acknowledges that common law jurisprudence is one of the underpinnings of its foundation. The elements of common law duress are the procuring of a benefit by compulsion, there it is again, or pressure. So they actually use the common law definition back here under compulsion. And the illegitimacy of that compulsion or pressure. And it lists further case law references. The contract procured by duress is voidable. Bumpable. So at this point you could actually peacefully non-comply. And under this you could probably make a conscientious objection even to voting or being part of the electoral system, provided you can prove that the contract is under common law, the illegitimacy of the compulsion or pressure. So you have to show why it's illegitimate for them to pressure you into contracting, into enrolling into the Australian electoral system. If you can think of a good reason for that, you've got a good reason to actually non-consent, non-comply, do not contract. So that's under contractual and common law. The fact that they're using compulsion in itself, and that it has that voting is not necessarily compulsory, is made compulsory over the citizens, I should say the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. In the Australian Constitution, it speaks of those who can and can't vote. Those who can vote should, those who can participate in the vote or vote are the ones whose voices are counted in the process under the Commonwealth. And if we were actually operating under the Commonwealth constitutional processes, I probably wouldn't have as much of a problem in voting. Except, once again, at this point, how do you, with the fact that they want to digitise the whole voting system, they want to automate it more, right? How do you fucking keep it from becoming more and more corrupt and less reliable to speak the voice of the people? You have to go back to a simpler system. Right, so you've got duress in criminal law as well. So duress and compulsion are directly linked in contractual law and also in common law. Right, so if you think that it's right for you to be compelled by the AEC, which is a corporate entity, and operating on the basis of some doubtful legislation, to say the least, for its authority to compel you, use compulsion to make you vote. If you think that that's an acceptable way for the government to behave and to treat you, and if you're willing to comply with that, well, best of luck to you. Best of luck to you. But for myself, I'm not going to comply with that.